Conversations with Elders, hosted by yours truly, Louis Marie Blanche, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432, where we will be TED Talking in tongues with the elders of all ages, all generations, all races, cultures, and creeds. All gender, religious, or political preferences will be honored and encouraged on Glastonbury Radio 432, Conversations with Elders, where it is our treasured pleasure to roll out the red carpet of golden liquid love light to you in honor of the queendom come, soul dancing free to life's heartbeat drum, in honor of mother, daughter, sister, lover, priestess, goddess, friend, sharing the blessings of love's perfect stranger, Deja Vu, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432.
It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic.
Aloha, ola, aho, hello. We are returning once again to The Garden of a Desert Rose, written by my beloved Deborah L. Kelley, and we are starting chapter number 6, which is entitled The Snake. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. And he who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will you give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will you give him a snake? Matthew 7-10.
Lenny dropped into a deep sleep immediately. 1 minute she was noticing the rise and fall of her breath. In the next, she was watching words swirling around in her bedroom like wingless insects. As she watched them rise up and down off the ceiling, she followed them. Lenny glanced down. She was flying as free as a bird. Her house in her neighborhood grew smaller and smaller. She hardly digested this scene when suddenly it changed. Her eyes were still cast downward as she could see her bare feet, her toenails painted with brightly glowing red nail polish. As she watched, her feet came to rest on a golden yellow grass. She raised her head and saw she had landed near her long ago home in Texas. She loved the nearby grassy fields dotted with bluebonnets. She and the father of her 2 children had once been happy here, but it had all ended so bitterly. Where was the wind, she wondered. Texas always had a cold wind blowing through the grassy plains in the wintertime. Her daughter was born in Texas, at a hospital in downtown Fort Worth. As postcard memories danced in her head, a city appeared in the distance. Suddenly, she decided to walk toward it, but as soon as she started, she found she was there, downtown. Lenny imagined herself to be in a section of Fort Worth she once adored. The streets were made of smoothly worn cobblestones. Looking from side to side, she noticed the buildings appeared different from how she remembered them. They weren't a homey Western style at all. Architecturally, the buildings were ancient and Gothic. In fact, it now appeared she wasn't even in the United States. For a short period of time during her second marriage, Lenny had worked as a part-time travel agent. She had seen these buildings once in a travel brochure. She realized she was indeed not in Texas. She was in the City of Lights, Paris, France. A rush of excitement traveled through her entire body, and she soaked up all the splendid surroundings, bathed by a melon-colored setting sun. She spun around and around with her arms open wide. As she did, the city's colors changed. Now she saw more yellows and oranges. Black iron street lamps with tiny white lightning bug-sized lights loomed overhead. She threw her head back and wondered why she suddenly felt very small in contrast. Without thinking where she might go, Lenny started walking. As she wondered what grand sight she might see next, she saw one, the Eiffel Tower. All the lights and the colors of the sky seemed so beautiful. She remembered Vincent van Gogh writing to his brother that he tried to always look at the world with simple, childlike eyes, filled with wonder and adoration and totally devoid of judgment. Yet as soon as he fell into adult thinking, judging, for example, a gray day was less beautiful to capture on canvas than the bright yellow sunflowers. He wasn't able to love the world as deeply and passionately. He felt this lack of love showed in his work. If judgment was powerful enough to bring death to an artist's creative imagination, Lenny thought it must be powerful enough to create a deep abyss, breaking her connection to God's divine light within her heart. Viewing all the sunset's colors with the simple, childlike eyes of Vincent van Gogh, he so prized this. Lenny wondered why she couldn't always feel the same about life, fully in the moment. As this thought entered her awareness, she suddenly smelled the foul odor of smoke. She turned around and saw a cafe with a red and yellow striped canopy. Sitting at one of the tables was a dark-haired man. It felt as if his gray cigarette smoke was pulling her into his field of consciousness like an unexpected calling card. He was very handsome, although not the rough, tough cowboy type who usually appealed to her. Lenny had always thought her first husband looked like Roy Rogers. This man, however, was no cowboy. He was dressed in white, appeared to be wearing a very expensive Armani suit. He had midnight black hair and looked very Egyptian. He wore a white shirt and dark tie. On his face was a neatly trimmed mustache and beard. She couldn't see the color of his eyes, but they looked dark and mysterious. As she wondered who he was, he turned and looked at her. Then, seemingly disinterested, he coolly turned his back to her. She watched as he put what appeared to be a glass of champagne to his lips. Lenny suddenly felt judged, naked. She looked down to see if she really was naked. Thank God she wasn't. She was still wearing her nightgown. She didn't even know this man, so why did his opinion of her even matter? Suddenly, Lenny remembered her hair curlers. Her arms felt as heavy as logs, and she wondered why. After a bit of struggle, she felt the top of her head. To her horror, she realized they were indeed still in her hair. She thought about how ridiculous she must look. Those simple childlike eyes, adoring the beautiful sunset seconds ago, were gone in the blink of an eye. Lenny was back in the poisonous trap of self-judgment. Thinking another person thought bad of her, so did she. Thoughts about broken dreams of yesteryear filled her head with sadness. The little girl in her wanted a happy ever after storybook Prince Charming. For many years, she had been grieving the loss of not having a romantic storybook ending. Her second divorce was a crushing blow to her ego. She knew she couldn't rewrite her life story, but perhaps with effort she could let go of silly fantasies about the future that caused her nothing but pain. Lenny turned away from her handsome stranger. As she started walking, she heard a loud, whizzing, rushing water sound. She turned her head toward the noise, and a beautiful, circular, stone-walled fountain rose high into the air before her. The fountain was so beautiful it took Lenny's breath away. In the center of the fountain was a tall marble statue. The stone gray sculpture was encircled by a spray of white mist. Lenny's body began to tingle. She focused on the statue. She had been seeking center, and now she had found one. Suddenly, the rushing water became silent. She was now somehow standing on the rim of the stone-walled fountain. Her toes were almost hanging over the edge. This change of perspective made the monument-like pedestal upon which the statue stood look much larger than before. Now, able to make out more details, she saw the statue was a stone carving of a man. He was muscular, but pint-sized compared to the enormous world globe resting upon his back. Lenny immediately recognized it as a hideously disproportionate atlas. The artist who sculptured this atlas had bent his back almost into the shape of a horseshoe. His head hung low, and Lenny was sure if she could have seen his face, it would have been grimacing. She was just about to turn away when she heard a man's voice say in low tones, "As you think, so are you." "I beg your pardon," Lenny responded, not exactly sure to whom she was responding. The statue was silent, but as Lenny stared at him, Atlas raised his head. Lenny tried to scream, but the scream was muffled as if she had a mouthful of cotton. Her statue was not wearing a man's face. It was her own face she was looking into. Shocked, she lost her balance and fell off the wall. But instead of hitting the water in the fountain as she expected, she just kept falling and falling and falling as if she were plummeting into a well. The deeper she fell, the more frightened Lenny became. Fear gripped her heart as the walls of the well seemed to squeeze inward like a throat trying to swallow her as she tumbled headfirst into a blackness. Finally, her fear intensified. She felt solid ground beneath her feet. Lenny looked up to see a pinpoint of light from a faraway source hanging over her head. The light gave her hope. Perhaps she could be rescued from whatever it was she fell into. But the narrow cave-like well was so deep. Lenny looked around to see if she might spot a rock or an object to toss toward the light. Perhaps someone would see it. That's when she noticed the writing on the wall. Moving closer, she made out 3 words that appeared to have been scratched into the stone with a knife. The words vibrated as if alive, but finally she was able to read 3 of them: power, will, and determination. Lenny stared at the words for what seemed like a long time. They somehow made her feel less frightened and alone. But she still had to figure a way out of the well, and at that moment, what she really desired most was a rope. Then, inside her head, she heard, "This is your rope." Instantly, Lenny was transported back into her bedroom. Although not into her body, she stood beside herself, watching herself sleep. She had never done this before. It was as if her subconscious mind and conscious mind possessed 2 different bodies. In the body she now housed, she noticed a refreshing, calm detachment from worries of the previous day. And in this body, somehow, she didn't seem to be breathing. She felt as if its home existed in a world beyond breath. Free from the bondage and struggles of life, she felt suspended in the air like a crystal clear veil of light. As she watched her sleeping body, she noticed something odd about her arms and hands. They appeared to be covered in words, but the words were small and impossible to read. "This is not good," Lenny whispered as she spoke. She was suddenly no longer looking at her body. She was back inside it. The slow in and out rhythm of her breathing returned. Then she became aware her right arm was waving in the air. It seemed to move on its own, separate from Lenny's will. She could feel something wiggling in her tightly clasped fists. Perhaps she still held the rope she had prayed for. She opened her eyes. They seemed glued together and wanted to open slowly. Fear gripped her as she immediately realized the rope in her hand was a snake, a thick-bodied, mean-looking striped snake of the red and yellow kill-a-fellow variety. Then the snake's eyes disappeared. All Lenny could see was an enormous black cave-like mouth with two white fangs. They were a breath away from striking her in the face. Sheer horror shot through her body, and she was about to lose her grip on the creature. Determined not to die before raising her children, Lenny flung the snake as hard as she could. As she threw it, she let out a scream that ripped her right out of her nightmarish half-sleep. Lenny sat up straight in the bed. She looked for the snake. She knew it was real, but how could it be? Had she suddenly lost her mind? Then out of the corner of her eye, she saw something move next to her left hand. With her right hand, she whipped it sideways without a single minute of hesitation. A small lace pillow flew through the air, knocking over her clock radio and a vase full of artificial daisies. She'd never in her life had such a real and lucid nightmare. She had felt the snake against her skin as it had wiggled and tried to fight its way out of her hand. Worse, she still sensed its presence in the room. Her bed now appeared to be lumpy, too lumpy for comfort. The lumps had to go. She stood up on her mattress and yanked off sheets and her grandma's quilt. She felt better until she saw how lumpy the floor now looked. "What was I thinking?" she whispered. Now she'd have to clean things up, and the floor looked even more frightening. She had to get a grip on her nerves. Maybe she was having a nervous breakdown. She'd read about people having them. Perhaps this was now happening to her. But she felt as sane as ever. She was not going to act like a coward. Even brave people experience fear, she thought, but it doesn't stop them from doing whatever they need to do. She climbed off the bed and scooped the bed linens into her arms. She opened her bedroom door and tossed them into the hallway. It was still dark outside her window, and the room was a little too dark for comfort, so she switched on the overhead light. The floor was still a total mess. Lenny began picking up daisies and what scattered all over the place. Several pink curlers had fallen out of her hair, and she picked them up and set them on her vanity. Then she sat at the vanity, tucking her legs under her as she unwound the remaining curlers from her hair. As she did, a flash of red snakeskin caught her attention. Lenny screamed and leapt off the vanity bench and onto the top of her bare mattress. The brass headboard groaned with disgust as it scraped against her bedroom wall. She felt foolish again and forced herself to peep over the edge of the bed. But the red she saw didn't belong to a snake. It belonged to her snakeskin shoe. She reached down and picked it up. Spotting its mate, she put both shoes on her feet. If something sinister was loose and roaming about, she wanted to be ready to kick it. Feeling armed and dangerous, she sat down on the bed. She needed to look up the symbolism of a snake in her dream dictionary. But this meant she would have to reach under the bed. At the moment, the last thing she wanted to do was stick her hand into a dark hiding hole. That's when the rest of her dream came flooding back to her. She had fallen into a dark well. Before the snake, she had seen her arms covered with words that were too small to read. But she had been able to read 3 words carved in the wall of the well. The first word was power, the second will, and the last word was determination. Right now, Lenny was determined to get the dream dictionary from under the bed. She slowly edged her way across the mattress, and then taking a deep, calming breath, she balanced her body halfway off the bed. She held onto the side of the bed with her left arm and lifted a white eyelet dust ruffle with her right hand. Then she grabbed hold of something furry and slung it out of her way. A missing slipper was now found. Lenny leaned further. She wiggled her fingers until they brushed against a hard surface, and she felt the cloth binding of How to Interpret Your Dreams. Her orange notebook was tucked underneath the dream dictionary. She could barely touch it with the tips of her fingers. Finally, she snatched it up. The dictionary, but dropped. She finally snatched up the dictionary, but dropped her notebook. As she reached back down to pick it up, loud music suddenly exploded in her right ear. She screamed, flipping off the bed head first. Her radio clock continued singing beneath her right shoulder. Mac burst through the door and ran into her bedroom. The back of his auburn hair was sticking up like a rooster's crown. "Mom, are you all right?" he asked, half panicked. "Barely," Lenny groaned. She could only imagine how bizarre she looked in her nightgown and red snakeskin high-heeled shoes. Seeing his mother was having trouble getting up, Mac bent down and grabbed her right arm and hand. "Were you jumping on the bed in high-heeled shoes?" he asked with a broad grin once he saw she was not hurt. "I had the worst nightmare," Lenny said with a sigh. "I don't even know how to explain it because it was so odd and it seemed so real." "Wow, Mom, what happened?" Mac asked. "Give me a second." Lenny bent down and placed her clock radio back on the bedside table. She sat down on the edge of the bed and told her son about her snake. Her description of the snake's colored stripes, its cave-like mouth, and its sharp teeth made Mac laugh out loud. "Stop laughing," Lenny teased. "I felt it wiggling in my hand. It was real." Mac looked to see if she was kidding, and realizing she wasn't, joking made him laugh. Joking about it made him laugh even harder. He bent over and rolled around on the floor, holding his stomach. He was laughing so hard he couldn't speak. Lassie, now wanting to not miss the fun, jumped on Mac's back and began licking his neck and face. Lenny loved hearing him laugh. "Did you say you saw a snake?" Elizabeth asked, running into the bedroom to see what all the commotion was about. "Oh boy, here it is." Her small, narrow feet scurried across the room as her eyes searched the floor for her mother's imaginary horror. "Mom, did you really see a snake?" "Yes, and it's in the closet," Mark screamed in mock terror. Then he jumped into the closet and dashed out, waving a satin waist sash of one of Lenny's bathrobes. He chased Elizabeth around the room with it, and of course, Lassie barked hysterically. Lenny finally calmed everyone down. She assured her daughter the snake wasn't real and it was only part of a bad dream. But Lenny didn't really believe it. When the children ran back to their rooms to dress for school, Lenny sat on the edge of her bed and jotted down as much of the dream as she could remember. It seemed a very odd cast of archetypal figures had paid her a visit last night. What they came to teach her would take some effort to figure out. She had little trouble recognizing that primarily she had encountered a poorly developed, harshly critical masculine being. The tiny Atlas statue carrying the weight of the world on his back. Lenny could definitely relate to him, and the voice of an inner critic wore the mask of a very handsome man in a Paris cafe. That part of the dream was a little confusing, but it didn't seem important at the moment. Lenny immediately recognized these figures as reflections of her animas, a name Jung used for the unconscious masculine archetype within all women, as opposed to the anima, the name he used for the unconscious feminine archetype that resides within all men. But for now, she needed to get ready for her day. She walked over and pulled out her red sweater off its hanger. It smelled like the air freshener she'd sprayed in her bedroom the night before. She attached the matching faux fur collar to it and then put on a slimming pencil skirt that reached just below her knees. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was pleasantly surprised to see she looked more rested this morning than usual. She didn't know how this could possibly be, having spent half the night falling down wells and wrestling a snake. Mac knocked on her bedroom door. "I'm dressed. You can come in," she said, reaching for a hairbrush to smooth out her curls. "Mom, did your snake look more like a copperhead or a cottonmouth?" he asked. "Neither," Lenny answered. "It was cherry red and yellow and lemon yellow, with a little fat worm-like body." Mac leaned against the wall, holding his side with laughter. "Son, just seeing you happy and laughing makes me feel happy. I'm starting to like my snake more and more. Now go get dressed. Today is your last day of school before Christmas break." Dressed and ready for breakfast, Lenny picked up the dirty bed linens from the hallway and headed toward the garage where her washer and dryer was hooked up. She started a load of laundry and walked back into the kitchen. The aspirin bottle was still bobbing in the dirty sink water. Lenny fished it out and tossed it into a nearby trash can. All the aspirin tablets had melted into the oily water. She didn't have time to fool with washing the dishes. She pulled the stopper out of the sink and drained the dirty water. Then she replaced the stopper, ran fresh hot water into the sink, and poured in more liquid soap. Satisfied for the moment, she went to check on the children.
The snake.
Yes, and you know my fear of snakes. They're still there.
Now in this dream, you picked it up.
It was more or less in my hand. And this, I want to add that all of these dreams in my myth, although I have fashioned my story and my characters from real life happenings and folded them, or poetically was told to fold them into the timeline of Christmas. And so even that, my guides told me what to add and what not to add. And I had that. It was a real dream. It was definitely a real dream. And the subconscious mind is a great teacher because we feed it with the happenings of the day, with our repressed or unrecognized thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and they do surface. And I've been a believer all my life of recording my dreams and seeing what wisdom they have to share. But that was because I'm a lucid dreamer, that was a very real snake experience.
So you still use a dream book?
I still use dream books. I have many that I love that help me. Now I'm lazy. I kind of get everything off the internet. I like to Google and discover, but it doesn't always tell me what I need to know. But if we ask the universe, which adores every one of us, no matter, I know Cosmic Mother, my experiences in those astral flights through an inner universe, I'm not sure where I'm at, but it's a level of consciousness that always gives me with acceptance and excitement. Deborah, what are you going to create next? A mess or a miracle? It's up to me. So yeah, I still travel those places. And fortunately, I haven't had a snake dream in a while. And I have to add this, sweetheart. There is a picture of you in a white suit, and your name is French. And you know, a funny thing about you and I is that you were one of my guardians. You came to me as a child and in my adult life as a wolf, like a silver wolf. So I named you Silver Wolf. And I certainly didn't know you were a real man coming into my future years. And but there's a picture of you in a white suit, and it reminds me of the man sitting at the cafe. But now, you know, this was published in 2011, and I wrote it throughout my 50s. I'm approaching 70 now with a great deal of joy and bliss. But nevertheless, yes. So you're in this book. In fact, I had forgotten. I didn't even remember this part. There you go.
Well, you know, it made me think when I was a young boy, my parents, my father had a great uncle and aunt, and they lived in Schenectady, New York, and we went to visit them. And I had a room by myself where I was sleeping. And then one night I was sleeping, I look out my bedroom door, and my uncle is standing there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to him, and he's not answering me. Mm-hmm. And when we had breakfast the next morning, I mentioned, I said, you know, Uncle Lewis was walking around, but he stood at my door, but he didn't say anything. And Aunt Rainey, she said, oh, no, he walks in his sleep. And that was I had never met anyone that walked in their sleep. But another thing that he did was every breakfast, he would ask everyone, what did you dream last night? Mm-hmm. And he had a dream book. He would get what you dreamt, he would look it up in his dream book. And this was way before there were lotteries. And in the New York area, the Italian deli, not all delis have to be Italian, but it seemed that a lot of them were Italian delis. But my uncle would check the numbers that related to your dream, and then he would go play those numbers at the deli, because the deli was a place
Yeah.
you'd go and you'd
Right.
bet on numbers and horses and things. But my mother and my grandmother, my Cherokee grandmother and my mother, had very different feelings from a lot of mainstream society. They believed in dreams. They utilized color. My mother would actually have me put my hand on the radio at times. She was when I was growing up, she was a very devout believer of Oral Roberts. But she took me over my childhood. We went to churches of every form and fashion. She was a very spiritually oriented person who believed in the power of prayer, and also through her mother and my grandmother, the understanding that energy was alive. And so I think about the energy you have in a dream as being, you're alive in another realm, and it has a message for you in this realm. Mm-hmm. And it's very, it's a lovely memory for me to look back at my elders and see the things that they were doing many, many years ago have now been verified by science and even deeper studies into spirituality.
Well, you know, I haven't read this. I worked so hard editing it. I haven't really read it in 9 years. But when I want to say about seeing words like tattoos all over my body, I know tattoos are really popular now. And so, but back then, when I was 32, they weren't as common. Sailors, I'm sure, had them. But what I look back now when I use that straight from my dream journal, and the scripture, as you think, so are you. We are actually creating, many say the subconscious mind is our physical body. That's a wisdom teaching also. I don't want to get into that. I'm not a scholar that can teach that. But I will say that when you live your life from an open heart, God center, I was told this by a yoga master who looked at my energy field and said, you won't age like a lot of people. And he said, because of reasons he did not give me at the time, but what I see in this, the wisdom of this bringing down the light body, rainbow body, is that when you're as you think, so are you. When your thoughts are positive and you have reached a place of acceptance, of self-love, that is so much greater than the extra pounds that you put on when you grow older, or the wrinkles that kind of crinkle you up and many think is unattractive or not beautiful. You tell me every morning, I'm beautiful. And
wake up that way.
yes, but, yes, but for someone who turns 70 next year, it's a joy to hear, trust me. And I don't like to think of myself as vain, because I know that we're all so much more than the earth suit we're wearing. But if you're listening to my words, know that your subconscious mind, your physical body is creating from those words. And when you fill it with self-hatred, self-judgment, guilt, shame, I've gone through all of those lower vibrations. I've lived every single one. As you discipline your mind and live in those higher vibrations, you don't age, because you're so full of light and love in God. And no one can believe our age, your age, my age, because we don't act our age. In fact, we are foolishly getting a puppy in 2 weeks. And we're so excited. I haven't had a puppy for 50 years, a new puppy. I've always gotten dogs that were a little older, or someone was giving away, etc. But it's an exciting time for us.
Well, our beloved brother Prince, who's gone on to the happy hunting grounds, he had a lyric in one of his songs: "At your age, not your shoe size."
Cute.
But while we're talking about dreams, I want to finish out this segment with discussions of how dreams have affected both our lives. And as you know, my childhood memory that I just shared with my uncle, having a dream book and looking up the meaning of those dreams, came into play in my life later on, when I had a series of lucid dreams that greatly affected my life in ways that were such an incredible blessing. Even though I'd had a fire, I lost everything I owned except for a bag of writings. But I had dreamt of the house that we moved into. I had 2 roommates at the firehouse, and I dreamt of the house we moved into before having the fire. And that time in my life, I had dreams of people in places. Like I dreamt of Jamaica, and I followed my dreams. I was planning on going to Alaska to work. I had a band, and I was going to work in Alaska and save money to do the recordings that I wanted to do. But these dreams of Jamaica called me to Jamaica, and I went to Jamaica at a time that was very volatile. Manly was running against Siaga. A lot of violence was going on. A lot of corruption was going on in Jamaica. And a lot of people were actually leaving Jamaica. Mm-hmm. In fact, Bob got shot at and left the island for a while. And ironically, it was at that time that I went down to Jamaica, and on my way there, I was telling people where I was going. People that knew about Jamaica were not very encouraging about my going. But when I got there, I saw the people in places that I had seen in my dreams. And it's still happening in my life, where I have dreams in my nocturnal realms of so-called sleep that become validated in my waking hours. And I wondered if there was any other dreams that you might share that you've had, that you've manifested or seen manifest. I don't know, when you say you saw me, as you called me Silver Wolf. And
yes, Bobby D, which is he was an extraordinary seer. He called himself an intuitive counselor, and his third eye was must have been the greatest gift he had while walking the earth. He saw everyone as rainbows, but not only that, he had the gift of discernment. He knew the colors. He knew what was going on in your soul, in your earth mind, monkey mind, as well as your higher mind, your God mind. He said, and so when I was sharing that an experience of continuing dreaming of a large wolf that I had named Silver Wolf, and I had, anytime I was around someone who was gifted and intuitive, they would say, "Do you realize you have a large silver wolf around you? And he's almost frightening. It's like he's your guardian." And I said, "Yes, I know. I've seen him. We play in dream time." And the funny thing is I was sharing this with my beautiful spiritual teacher at that time. This is back in my 30s and 40s. He said, "He's not a wolf. This isn't a wolf. This is a this is a master soul who you've had with you since you were a little girl, playing at your grandmother's house in the streams and the water. He's Native American and has had many incarnations as a Native American." And Bobby never spoke of past lives. He, of course, being in the Bible Belt, you just didn't do that because it angered and scared a lot of people. But he looked at it as we have one life. It's a soul life. Look at it this way. And it tries on many different earth suits and many different eras of time, because we're eternal after all. That's common knowledge, and people say it all the time. But we forget that this is a temporary vessel. So when he said to me, "Your silver wolf is a shapeshifter, and he's a Native American, and he has great wisdom and knowledge, and he is with you. I can see him right now." So I got home, and I know from habit, because someone taught me this, or I just knew it, that if you go to bed and say, "I want an answer," to my higher self, I say, "I want a vision or a dream, and I want an answer to come to me. And if this is my spirit guide, is a Native American, I want to see his Native American face." So I don't think it happened the first time I insisted on that, but it was the second or third time. I got an answer immediately. A large silver Indian head nickel, which depicts a Native American profile with feather in his hair on the side of his ponytail, like Louis always worn. And I, in my dream, because I'm a lucid dream, I'm awake in my dreams, so I'm totally in the etheric body, or whatever you want to label it. I'm quite unsure how this works, but I said, "No, I don't want to see your profile. I want to see your face." Face me. In other words, I'm bossy, so I said, "Face me." And I can't tell you the times Louis has looked at me shaking his head. "Oh my goodness, you're so stubborn and bossy." And he had that grin right there, saying, shaking his head, "Oh, you're never satisfied." So anyway, when we met 6 years ago, this month actually, it was my silver wolf, and it was my Native American, what I thought my guide and teacher and protector all these years, was actually my cosmic soulmate, twin flame, whatever. These are labels, but it was my destiny. It was my destiny when I wrote this book. And I am actually taking these stories from my dream journals. So I had actually forgotten that dream. And I'm telling you why it's so important for each and every one of you to record your dreams, because they slip away. They're gone. And you can go back the next year or a week or a month later, or like me, 10 years later now, and you're going to go, I'd forgotten that. And there was great wisdom in that. So
for our listeners,
write your myth.
For our listeners, one of the techniques for being better at remembering your dreams, there's advice that's often given is to put a journal next to your bed. And when you have a dream, wake up, jot it down in your journal. Because as Deborah was saying, you might have a beautiful dream at night and wake up in the morning and it's on your mind, and you go to the bathroom, you go make coffee, and before you know it, the dream that seemed like such a panoramic, full-fledged movie,
Right.
you don't remember any of it.
Exactly.
So you have to honor it. And the story goes that the more you honor it, the more they will honor you, and that they will come more frequently and etch themselves into your inner knowing so that you know they are to be paid attention to. So simply honoring them by saying, I'm going to write this down. Even though you may not know what it means, write it down, because the meaning could come. You never know how it might come. Like in my case, I had dreams of Jamaica. I'd never been to Jamaica.
Right.
And I saw people in Jamaica that I'd never met before. But when I got there to those places that I had seen in my dreams, I saw those places through my dreams, and then in real life saw them again. And I saw the people that were in my dreams. So the message with this sharing that we're doing pertaining to chapter 6 of Deborah's book, which was entitled The Snake, is that you are being communicated with throughout your daytime hours and your nighttime hours. And your life is building a mythology. It's got a story. Your soul has a journey, a mission. We're on a journey of the heart. And there are global positioning systems, like a Wi-Fi system, that feeds us locations and directions. And many of those locations and directions that our souls are really given the opportunity, because we have free will. Your free will could say, well, I don't want to pay attention to that, and I'm not going to do it.
Right.
But I say, don't play with free will, because sometimes it will persist at getting your attention. And there are easy, gentle ways that you can pay attention to the signals and signs in your life. Or you can have what Jeffrey Wolf Green,
yes.
Who wrote he downloaded, actually, he had a download of information pertaining to the north and south nodes of Pluto. And he speaks of how you can have easy awakenings, or what he calls cataclysmic awakenings. Pluto is a very powerful energy, and it can be gentle in its communication to you. But the way that Jeffrey Wolf Green speaks of Pluto's effect in our astrological makeup is that you can see where the north and south node in your chart is, and one will show you where you've been, and the other will show you where you're headed. But heed those messages. They can be seen as warnings, but just see them as signs along the highway, along your journey of the heart. And I think what's making this book so special as we go through it is that The Garden of a Desert Rose is a great example of how Deborah and Kelley took her life seriously, even though the moments that weren't so enjoyable to dwell upon, she looked at those moments to see what was there to be.
Well, good, bad, or ugly, they are part of my myth. And the wisdom taught to me through all the books that Carl Jung wrote that I couldn't even afford to buy. I always check them out at the library. When you don't have a lot of money, and a lot of people don't during 2020 pandemic, you know, there are books available online. You don't even have to hunt up a library to inspire your mind and your thoughts, and to help others get through this. You can ask yourself, what is my myth? I'm not promoting this book. I'm wanting to inspire you to write your own myth, to know yourself and know God. Like Carl Jung said, he didn't believe in God. He knew himself. He knew his myth. He knew his dreams and visions. And he had the discernment to help others unscramble their signed symbols and all the things that would come to them, and interpret them to help them heal and to have good psychology. I'm speaking from a person who had very, very bad psychology, and how I feel now. I'm living my dream. Louie and I talk daily how blessed we are. And we hope that this will inspire others to feel and become as blessed as we are.
So you might say she's not here to promote her book. She's here to inspire and promote you to write your book.
Yes.
And on the closing note, on the back of the cover of this book, she has a quote by C.G. Jung, and it says, "One without a myth is like one uprooted, having no true link either with the past or with the ancestral life, which continues within him, or yet with contemporary human society." C.G. Jung. So he's saying one without a myth is like one uprooted. So plant your roots in that cosmic soil, and as Deborah's grandmother said in the first chapter, blossom and grow. And we will return with chapter 7 next, which is entitled Sand and Pearls. And we hope you'll be with us. Bless you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Well, that's it for here and now. But until we meet again, this has been Louis Blanche thanking you for listening to Conversations with Elders on Glastonbury Radio 432. Bless you.
Quantum physics in the kitchen sink, the energy that follows the thoughts you think. Quantum physics and the cosmic sea, laws of nature too heavy for me. It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Science is sexy, physics is tasty, love is life's magic puzzle becomes a forgotten dream, forever flowing, born again to be remembered. Life's magic puzzle becomes a forgotten dream, forever flowing, born to be remembered.